Drums of War, Chapter 44, Part 2. Aboard the Speaking Softly, in orbit above Azad. Rear Admiral, upper half, Nelson Jock disliked the Speaking Softly. Not that she was a bad ship, by any means, far from it. She was just not built as primarily a warship, but rather a center for diplomacy and coordination that can defend herself. She was a political vessel, with guns and a full squadron of destroyers in her hangar, in case anybody decided to try politics by other means. Admiral Jock was what in the days of wet navy could be called an old salt, and so he found such settings highly discomforting. He had to keep focused to prevent his hackles from rising or his lips curling in a snarl on their own. The fact that she was even here seemed a bit like tempting fate to the old salt. But then again, the Republic was sending enough tonnage to not only glass the Exarch homeworld, creatively called Exarch, but to crack it to its core, which admittedly would be the least desirable possible victory, hence the second most prestigious diplomatic vessel in the Republic fleets. Of course, the most prestigious was the Wee Sing, and she drifted somewhere between the stars, her keel sundered, and her hull open to vacuum. It was just as well, whether he liked it or not, since he was there to essentially do politics. He had spoken to an ambassador from the Star Sailor fleet, a woman that he had known well before the outbreak of the war, and found her harder and stronger than he remembered. Stronger and harder, but more brittle too. He had gained her support almost at once, as his goal was a matter of honor to the Star Sailors. It was a matter of honor to the 2nd Star RRG and the Lost Boys Special Operations Division, too. Admiral Amelia the Saw Ross would want to open up orbital bombardment and drop 2 full divisions of RNI troopers on the planet and hold the Lost Boys in reserve. However, Chief Admiral of the Republican fleets, Hail Mary McBride herself, had ordered the entire flotilla to be at the rendezvous where they'd be reinforced, both in ships, crew, and RNI replacements. The last item was by far the largest. However, the enemy had opened hostilities by murdering a ship that was practically wholly to the Lost Boys. They deserved to be the first boots down, and the first fist to the face of the enemy. By God and creation, he would put those boys on the planet if he had to go through 3rd Fleet to do it. Pleasantly, he had the chance to see her children, which he hadn't had the opportunity for since the tragic day a year ago. They were too young to have that look in their eyes, and it broke his heart to know that even the 2 young girls, 6 and 10 years old, had looked death in the face. It hurt less to see that look in her son, but he was very nearly a man by the reckoning, and already dead set on being the first of his people to enlist in the RNI and qualify for the Lost Boys. As a Navy man, it was his obligation to at least poach such a motivated recruit, but the boy was immovable. Good lad. Small pleasures aside, he tried to get support from the flag officers in the 3rd Fleet for his points, but they were impenetrable. None of them wanted to be in the teeth of the saw. 3rd Fleet, the entire RRG, and the Speaking Softly all in the same operation. There were some strong personalities involved. Then again, weak wolves do not carry flags in the Republican Navy. He trod a lushly carpeted and finely paneled corridors like a stalking wolf, like a man on a mission, where the various flag officers were adding their ideas and suggestions to what would become the order of battle. He was about to open the door when a solidly handsome human called to him, "Wait a moment." Admiral Jock had to search his memory for a moment before he could place the man. "Ambassador," he said to Mikhail Volkov, whose name he just recalled. "Can I help you?" "Yes, I am thinking yes. Though maybe not. I wished to ask you, as you are the thing who might be able to be making things happen." Admiral Jock flicked his ears at the ambassador. "Apologies, Admiral. To explain, the coalition was late in joining as a nation, but not as a people. The first of us was charging in without even a plan, where they were so furious at what happened to the Wee Sing. And I'm not thinking it was I was nearly killed. The ship, she was called the Warp Speed Battle Wagon now, and she joined up with the fleet of Romanova. They are asking that I get the ship into the fighting with the first ships. She has earned esteem with the Romans, and they consider her as good as one of their own ships. And in the coalition, we think she's being a ship of heroes. I'll see what I can do, sir. It is for our honor, I understand, Ambassador. I'll see what I can do, but I can't promise you anything. This is all I can ask for. Thank you for hearing." And with that, Ambassador Volkov nodded gravely and left. The Romans, absolutely insane, but good enough fight, and punch well above their weight. He'd have to point out that they can actually help in this operation. Within, there was bedlam. Even though there was not a scrap of physical paper in the room, officers and staff were tossing holographic documents and files to each other via the holodesk so often that it looked like a paper storm. Furthermore, there was a low hum of constant discussions, questions, clarifications, and queries that thrummed and buzzed in that somehow unified disharmony of many voices in a room speaking at once. Indeed, the very air was thick with a sense of stale coffee, sweat, dander, bad breath, and cured meat sandwiches. In short, it was a command center. He walked right up to the large circular holotable dominating the center of the room, where the men and women with stars on their collars and cuffs were gathered. He studied the display, which seemed to be an amalgam of data taken from the planet below and data taken from the reconnaissance vessels skulking around the target system. It seemed the enemy had very rudely decided to have heavy defenses at their seat of power, and weren't very interested in just politely surrendering when the Republic showed up. Pity. The enemy only exists to be destroyed, and if they knew that, they'd quit being the enemy. Admiral Jock tapped the cardboard tube he'd brought with him against the palm of his free hand and waited. "Jock," Admiral Ross said without glancing down. "Good, you're here. Frankly, SSRG is one of our best formations." She showed him her teeth. He did not rise to the bait. He moved to the end of the tube to the circular motion to indicate that he was listening. "Much as it galls any fleet admiral to admit it, so I want you to drop in out past the first asteroid field and wait to see where the fight's the hottest." "No, I don't think we'll do that. I think what we'll do is drop in at MSD and put our fucking boot in and drop the Lost Boys before they know what's happening. Then you bring the hammer down," Admiral Jock answered soberly. "And why would we do that?" Rear Admiral Upper Half Kai Watanabe asked pointedly. "Because the RRG is not a slugger fleet. The entire point of us is to be highly mobile, maneuverable, and fast. And we are at that. We can damn near dogfight in our destroyers, and you all know it. But that's not the only reason, but you know that too." Admiral Jock noted that nobody could hold his gaze when he met their eyes, except, of course, Admiral Ross and Rear Admiral Upper Half Benjamin Hughes. Of course, the Saw liked her own plan. "I can think of reasons not to commit our best ships and RNI troopers at the onset of battle," Admiral Hughes said softly. "First, because despite the fine work of our reconnaissance, we might be mistaken in our estimations of enemy strength, and might need the RRG or the Lost Boys fresh, or at least unbloodied. Second, you may be rebuffed in your punch-through strategy, or be trapped against the planet once you do punch through by sheer weight of enemy numbers. Third, your resolve to command under pressure is in question." "Did you, Admiral, just call me a coward?" The room froze. Admiral Hughes pretended not to notice and said, "It is rumored that your resolve failed quite recently, Admiral. You are welcome to test that rumor at your convenience, though I shall consider the third repetition cause to demand satisfaction, sir." Admiral Hughes raised an eyebrow and opened his mouth, but a look from Admiral Ross he quieted. Admiral Jock hated this posturing. He'd have preferred to open with a challenge, but things simply were not done that way. "All right, Nelson, say your piece. Your real piece, I admit. Your tactical device is sound, but riskier than I like." Admiral Jock uncapped the tube and drew forth a tightly furled flag. He unrolled it across the holotable with a snap of the void-black fabric, and its familiar devices drew every eye in the room. "Most people think that this banner has 2 stars in it. I've even heard some CIPers cups call it the Twin Suns banner. This," here he tapped the larger of the 2 circles, the orange one with silver and green at the edges, "is not a snar. It's ignitia. Its people were wiped from the Republic by our own hands to stop the spread, and not one girl or woman made it off it alive. The Lost Boys did. This is where they come from, the terrible necessary evil that led to the report eventually being accidentally adopted by the Starsaders of the Among the Startides we sing. Their culture is all but forgotten. The Third Reformed Creole only exists in snatches of nursery rhymes and half-remembered lullabies. But this and the Lost Boys endure anyway, and they desecrated the first home a Lost Boy found. If you deny them their vengeance, I'll go right the fuck through you." Fine, Nelson. You're right. It's a matter of honor. And if we don't put the Lost Boys' boots down first, they'll never forgive us. Hell, they might make a rift between us and the whole damn R&I, Admiral Ross admitted, as if she was putting teeth out of her skull through her nose. Now, the Romans are willing to take instructions for once. Let's not waste their minor miracle, Admiral Jock said. He left the flag there on the holotable. It lay beneath the target, like a waiting pit. Aboard the Jupiter's might as she orbited above Azad. The crew of the warp-speed battle wagon was gathered around where fire flickered in two brazen bowls that cast a dancing light onto marble busts lined up in rows. There was a new face among them now, and just like always, Marcus stood out. Captain Lena Chen had insisted that the sculptors didn't give his pretty face a grimly stoic expression, and instead carved him as he lived, joyful. He would have liked his bust, Captain Lena Chen thought. The way the flickering light played on the marble made it almost look like he was laughing. Captain Lena Chen liked that. She was touched that the Romans counted him among their victorious dead. They weren't so bad once you got to know them, still batshit insane, but basically good people. Last chance, she heard herself croak. I don't know if I could pull the old brass bucket through this fight in one piece. You sail with me in this fight, it might be your last. Nobody laughed. I need her. For some reason, Captain Lena Chen's throat was too tight to get the words out, and her cheeks were suddenly wet. She stood in silence for a moment before forcing it out. I need a first officer. Nobody volunteered. He left big shoes. She couldn't finish the sentence. She should have let him marry her years ago, but the job needs doing. Don't make me beg. Not in front of Marcus and his new friends. Hiroshi Tanaka, her navigator, stepped forward. He didn't say anything. His set jaw and implacable gaze said everything clearly enough. On the surface of Azad, Lieutenant Emily Sullivan looked at the holographic display of a portable holodesk in the base and tried to think like a wounded scout. A wounded scout with a crippled child to protect from the kid's own murderous people. It was not an exercise she relished. His last known position had been fairly high up in a tall building overlooking a wide open area, but that position was hit by enemy artillery. The army didn't find a corpse in power armor in the rubble of that building, which didn't mean much since it was a stealth armor, not the assault model, which could make finding him tricky. I don't think we'll do much good helping pick through the building rubble here. If he was here and alive, he would have figured out who holds this ground weeks ago. So he's got to have moved. A sniper, and his position was compromised. But he had a complication? Liability, Specialist Alexei Petrov said bluntly. Emily winced, but MedTech Juan Hernandez and MedTech Jamal Watkins nodded gravely, while Dr. Sarah Patel merely looked queasy. He's R&I. He'll prioritize the injured civilian and try to evacuate as quickly as possible. Juan mused with eyes narrowed. Structural compromise. He would have just picked up the kid and done a power armor sprint. That explains finding the rifle, Dr. Patel said. But from what the other scouts said, the kid had severe compound fractures in one leg being treated with a cast. Better than nothing, but after this, the poor boy might need extensive corrective surgery. We need to find him first, Jamal said. Can you call up how the building stood before the collapse? Emily did so, and she thought she was tracking with him. So she put in a call up the chain. Cap, you have any clue for how far the R&I stealth model human pattern set of armor power can jump with a 90-foot running start? Captain Mark Ramirez, from his office where he was busy coordinating between teams on the ground, replied over the comms. I think around half again as far as the rescue model. They're not as heavy, since they're not meant to be sustained lifting and holding. And, rambling. A man in a scout suit could clear impressive gaps if he times it well. So we should be looking here in this building, Alexei said, putting his finger through the building in question. Is the closest side of the building away from tilt, and Trooper would be thinking about not being crushed by a building falling on him. Do we know what floor he started on? Jamal asked. We start here and search going down. We'll keep going subterranean even if we don't pick up a trail. According to the file, this guy used the tunnel systems to move around pretty reliably, so he might have had a fallback in mind, Emily said, poking a floor of the building. Okay, people, we don't have much time, and they have less. Let's get moving. End of chapter. I'd greatly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Casper Arnholtz, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.